Set up and go. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the Real Estate Power Play podcast, where we bring you the latest and greatest information and help you grow your business to the next level in real estate investing. We also talk about a lot of other things within here, within the real estate investors world, which is just running your business, other ways to do from legal stuff that we bring on guests to where we have on guests that show us how to do wholesaling, flipping, and multifamily stuff. So if you guys want to know more stuff after you get done, you like what you see, you laugh a little, and you just enjoy this podcast, we'd be excited to hear your story also. So text us, call us, DM us. I hear echo on here, guys.
We hear you perfect.
Okay. Interesting. So anyways, guys, we have Mark Monroe and Ronnie Walker. So guys, what's happening? What's happening in your world?
Ronnie?
Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, all right. You guys want to start this over?
Please.
It's kind of a train wreck from the beginning.
Yes, please. There is an echo. Check.
1, 2, 3. I think we have to create a new room now, but that's fine.
There's an echo because when I'm talking, I'm here. So everyone mute. Check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, Ronnie, unmute. Check. 1, 2, 1, 2. It's that one. Mark, unmute.
Here.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it's Ronnie. So Mark, talk and see if you can hear yourself.
Testing 1, 2, 3. 1. Fadely. 1, 2, 3. But I hear it coming through your mic.
Hold on.
It's weird because it's coming through Ronnie's. Okay, Mark, talk.
Testing 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1. Test. Test 1.
Check. 1, 2. Oh, way better. Ronnie, whatever you did, what'd you do?
Can you hear me or no?
I can hear you, but whatever that was, it's no longer echoing.
All right, let's see.
All right, do we need to create a new room?
That fancy equipment over there.
We need to create a new room, or does the person, can they just come in?
Oh, we could just tell them to cut it out.
Start at 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me do it again too, because my intro sucked. So, ready? Everyone ready? Ronnie, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can. That sounds. There's still an echo whenever I talk, but as long as you guys don't hear it, that's fine. Whenever I talk, I can hear it echo.
I'm gonna switch my mic. It's being whack. All right, go ahead.
All right, you ready?
Yep.
Okay. Ready? This is number 2. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the Real Estate Power Play podcast, where we're coming to you just sharing the great knowledge of real estate investing and running a real estate investing business. Today we have the man, Mark Monroe, and Ronnie Walker. What's happening, guys? What's the word? Everybody's on.
How we doing? What's going
on? Everybody's on mute.
What's going on, Gabe? How you doing today, man?
Doing good, man. Doing good. How are you guys?
Oh man, just plugging away, and we're starting to get the buds of spring. Trying to get my hot tub fixed, and just plugging away, man. Doing some deals. I'm excited to talk about our topic today.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. Mark, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks so much. Excited. We haven't had. I haven't been on here with 3 of us in a while. We've been having so many amazing guests, but it's finally good that we finally catch up and kind of put some value out there to everybody. But I can't complain. Everything's great in my world.
Good. Well, guys, today we're going to go over some really unique stuff of just the wholesaling side of things and also the creative financing side of things. And so right now we are in the month of March. We're about to come into April of 2023. The market's doing different wild things. You have speculation of price droppings or price drops. You also hear people going, this isn't going to happen. Let's just keep moving forward. I like that bandwagon of like, let's just keep pressing on, because you don't want to really just time the market. I think that's not the best idea to do, because then you're on the sidelines. But there's a lot of cool things that are coming up. There's opportunities for creative financing. And one of the things that we did, which was probably 3-4 years ago now, guys, is meet each other at a creative finance mastermind event. And out of that, we all have structured deals together, grown together as individuals, as individual businesses. From Mark in Florida, he's done all types of stuff outside of the state of Florida. Ronnie has done, well, I don't know. Well, what do you have? Well over 500 or well over 1,000 transactions?
I'm about 500 right now. I think
well over 500. I don't know why I thought 1,000, but well over 500. And how many of those? You'd say about 50% of those were the creative side, right?
Yeah, a little over 50%, correct?
Yeah. So that's very unique. And we do the creative side for acquiring now commercial properties, which is really fun and unique when we're doing seller financing and different types of structures that we do. So let's dig into this, guys. This is a great topic, and we want to be able to give to those who are listening. So Mark, what are we seeing right now, and what have you been doing when it comes to the creative side of the real estate investing business?
With the market for the past 6 to 8 months, how it's kind of softened a little bit and pulled back a little bit, it's been really picking up. I've been doing the creative financing investing side during the whole entire time while everybody else has been focusing on wholesaling. I've been always constantly doing the seller financing strategies for, God, I don't know, going back to since way back when. I started this back in 1995. So I'm showing my age a little bit here. So, and I've seen it evolved over the years. And I see a lot of times, I see a lot of people shifting, coming into the seller financing world, the creative financing world that used to be wholesalers, shifting over. And we'll dive a little bit deeper, but a lot of people, they're coming in and they have no clue about some of the regulations and what they're doing, where they're just trying to look for assignment fee. But everything's great. I mean, I love this strategy because you're helping sellers out, getting them out of the situation. And then if you're, depending on your exit strategy, if you're holding it, or if you're trying to put somebody else into the property that wants to become homeowners that have great income, but they have credit challenges, it's a great hybrid in between. And then us, an investor, staying in the middle, make a couple of dollars along the way. So that's kind of what I like about it.
Sweet. And then Ronnie, what are you seeing happening right now, and what are you liking the most about these strategies that we've been using?
I think it comes back to what do you want to accomplish, and one of the end games in real estate is to hold property, right? Is to build assets, is to have cash flow that covers your expenses, right? I think that's a major milestone that people dream about on this journey towards financial freedom. And what creative financing allows you to do, it gives you a tool, it gives you a weapon really to come into the marketplace and solve different types of problems that the majority of people aren't talking about, right? Actually, this morning I spoke to a guy. His property's been on the market for 3/4 of a year. It's a $1.2 million property. And I just asked him, I was like, hey, are you open to exploring some creative options here? Right? Like, what do you plan on doing? He's like, I'm just kind of trusting my realtor. I was like, well, why don't we have a conversation? And what it does is it weaponizes you to be able to have strong conversations, to offer value in situations where people either feel stuck, while at the same time building up your portfolio of homes that aren't the ugliest in the neighborhood, homes that aren't, the nastiest property on the street. You can actually get some really sweet properties. You can pick up storage units and mobile home parks and commercial buildings, and let alone, single family 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom houses that are 6,000 square feet. It allows you to play in an arena that, at least for me, is a little bit more fun, right? If you know how to operate that rather than just dealing with the nastiest houses on the street. So that's one of the reasons why I like owner financing, is I really believe it will weaponize you to be able to solve people's problems in a various amount of times.
So let's go into that, because I really like the fact that you mentioned that, where you're saying that it doesn't have to be the least likable house on the street. It could be in a different type of neighborhood, right? You would never know that these homes. So what's a typical type of property or situation, I guess we should say, where these strategies work on? Is it just the prettiest house? Is it just the ugliest house? Is it just the motivation of the seller? Like, why don't we help out the listener really identify what are some areas that this strategy and this approach works for? Mark.
So there's several different strategies within seller financing. So what I like to do, I mean, it depends. Like you're saying, nice houses and nice neighborhoods. So, that's one strategy. So it really comes down to listening to the seller and really what they're trying to accomplish and looking for. So what I tend to do is I tend to identify, I look for people that the house has been sitting on a market, like for sale by owner, or even Zillow, or even an MLS that's been sitting on a market upwards of like 90 days plus, and they can't move it. And that's kind of what I tend to do. And then I'll go into it and kind of, I mean, I could give a scenario on everyone. It could be a nice neighborhood. But normally what I like to do is whatever the median price range is for that area, I like to stay 20% above it or 20% below it, because when your exit strategy, that's where your buyer pool is. That's kind of what I tend to do. However, if it's within that 20, say if it's $250,000, like I'll go up to 300,000 on my max, or normally down to 200. But I will look at something under 200,000, because sometimes it could be just a rundown house, like, that needs a lot of work in a beautiful area. But I want to look at the neighborhood and kind of see what's going on with the neighborhood, because that's where your buyer pool is going to be. That's normally where I like to stay in. But then you can also do creative seller financing strategies within, the homes that are run down. And I see, Ronnie, you want to kind of piggyback off of that?
Yeah, guys, I think there's like 26 different ways you can do seller financing. And it's easy to get caught up in the details. But really what we're doing is we're solving a problem of getting rid of a house, either at someone who wants to make the most amount of money out of their house and doesn't need the cash now, or someone who's in some type of financial distress where that payment, that home is actually, causing them to be house poor, right? For one reason or another, whether they're going to go through a foreclosure, whether they just don't have the money, whether they want to transition. And so taking these two giant categories, specifically for single family, and then saying, okay, how do I apply these to the situation in front of me? And being able to apply those to the situation in front of us, I think, is really where the magic happens. And that's where, when you're talking to someone and they're like, I'm going to list the property in June. You're like, okay, cool. Like, what's your goal? Like, what? Well, I need to sell it so I can get a mortgage on the other house. It's like, okay, well, would you be willing to rent it to me? Or do some kind of creative option? Well, I need a mortgage. And you're like, okay, well, let's walk through that. And then you walk through the scenario and they're like, oh, I can make $50,000 more if I just wait 4 years. It's like, yeah, you can. You can avoid, $35,000 in real estate fees. You can avoid the transaction. You can avoid this, and you can capture that profit that usually would go to the transaction. Is that something you'd be open to? Well, yeah, let's talk about it. And so what happens is you're engaging people in a market where people are asking either one of two questions. How do I get out of this house? But more likely, what I'm finding is, how do I make the most amount of money out of this house? And that's where we can meet them and say, I can show you how people are maximizing their value of their home. And then you have the opportunity to show them that upside, and they can say yes or no. So that's a lot of the conversations I'm having.
So what's in it for us? Like, we talked about the value that we want to bring, right? So we have to bring value to the seller. Otherwise, there's really not a business model. So what is the value to the seller when we do these strategies? Are we helping them? And what's the value for us also? So we're going to help the seller move on from these properties in different ways, get them the maximum amount or whatever it might be. It might be cash in their pocket right now. And the only way to do that is to do a form of sub 2, right? So where's the win for us on this side of things, Mark?
So I like it because, especially if you're new, first of all, if you're new into real estate creative financing, you have to understand the different strategies and kind of be very careful. Like subject to, you mentioned, for me, I think you should have some type of real estate experience before you jump into the pool of doing subject to. That's my personal opinion, because there's so many moving parts. I think you want to start out with directly straight seller financing, or lease options, or actually sandwich lease options are great. because you can get into it with very little money down. It's a really low entry point. I think wholesaling and lease sandwich lease options or assignment lease options are kind of really close to each other, the low entry point and learning. But that's mine. So the benefit to the seller is, I had one where the seller transferred to a job, and they left 93 months ago. So they've been carrying the mortgage on 2 different locations, and they couldn't sell it. Otherwise, they're going to be dropping the price down, and they're going to be dropping the price by like $30,000. I ended up showing them that they're going to be making close to probably $50,000 doing it through selling it on terms over 5 years. I actually had another one that on the seller financing, we showed them at 10 years on a different one. They only originally wanted like 3 or 5 years, but I like to provide an amortization schedule, and I go over it line by. I say, hey, go down to line 120 for the payments. Look at how much money you would have collected during that time period, add that number up, and then look at the payoff balance, add those 2 numbers up. They added those numbers up. And how much are you asking for the price? Subtract that. They were making an extra $129,000 based off the interest over 10 years. So that was the benefit of them. And then us as the benefit, if you want to hold on to it as yourself as an investor and treat it as a rental and kind of build your portfolio up, that's a great job. Or you can go ahead and wrap it and then create another financing. But again, I'd recommend make sure that you have some type of real estate experience, or making sure you're working with a mentor or coach on one of those type of strategies, because it's a lot of moving parts, and you can I've seen people screw it up. And if you're buying it, depending on the strategy you're doing, you can kind of create a big mess out of it and you also have regulations that you need to follow. And that's the big part of it, that I see a lot of people out there doing stuff and they're not following the proper regulations.
And what about you, Ronnie? What is some of the benefits that you get to see after doing this for your guys' business model?
So creative financing was birthed out of asking the question, where can we make money in real estate? Right? Like, where's the money to be made? And I loved what Mark said about like get some real estate experience. The reason why is once you have some real estate experience, you'll start seeing, oh man, okay, there's profit centers in equity. Okay, cool. There's profit centers in cash flow. Okay, cool. There's profit centers in tax advantage. Oh, okay, cool. There's profit centers and appreciation. Oh, okay, cool. And so what happens is, if you understand these different ways that we make money as investors by owning property, the benefit to the investor is, I can pay full price. And actually, I can get the seller more than full price than they would get on the listing. But I can capitalize on some of these alternate profit centers outside of equity. And that's what we're looking for as investors when we're thinking creatively. What we're really doing is it's not actually all that creative. We're just asking, what are the non-traditional profit centers, and capitalizing on those? So we're capitalizing on the ability to have cash flow by offering a convenience to the seller. We're capitalizing on the ability to gain appreciation by showing the seller that they can make money through interest. And so it's a trade-off. I'm trading this profit center for a separate profit center, and I'm showing the seller, here's how you can maximize this profit area, while at the same time I'm maximizing this one, Mr. Seller, that you're not as worried about. Now, you're not necessarily talking to them, but your ability to understand those various profit centers helps when you're structuring a deal, because it allows you to be like, dude, all my profit centers are cut off. I can't make any money. Or, you know what? He just cares about his equity. Like, he just wants his equity. Well, what do we want when we buy a property? We want cash flow, and we want to hold it, and we want to gain that appreciation, and we want cash flow. We don't care about equity. So give them the equity, take the cash flow, and maximize your appreciation over the next 5 years. Imagine if you would have done that 4 years ago on 45 properties and captured the appreciation over the last 5 years. That's the power of being able to focus on an alternate profit center outside of just equity.
I love it, man. And one of the things, and this is cool, by the way, guys, because you're mentioning these other profit centers the way that Ronnie mentions it. So The cool thing that I saw on this was I don't need to have all of my cash just dumped into all of these properties right away. And that's really how we get started, right? You're just going, I can put, if you have a lump sum of money, you only can buy so many properties. And then you have to figure out how to get the financing on it. And right. And then we have people that come in and they'll go, okay, well, we have hard money lenders. Great. They work great. We all have used them in different manners. We have private money lenders. Great. We have traditional financing in some of the things. But when those things dry up or they're not there, or they don't work for the model that you're looking at, then you go back to this thing of saying what Mark and Ronnie just got done saying was like, but there's another way that you can acquire net worth, asset, cash flow, do this stuff that's outside of the traditional financing of an asset. And that's how this whole thing gets birthed. And we all get excited over it because we're going, okay, now there's creative ways of getting cash flow, right? And so this is why we have this conversation, is because we're helping people really get the creative side of doing things. And it takes a little bit of time, right? Like you guys remember your first one, it takes some time going, okay, I really don't know how the notes work. I don't know how the RMLO works. I don't know how these other things really needs to get applied. I just know that there's a deal here somewhere. The seller wants to move on. I have to figure out how to go through that process. So let's go there. So what happens whenever there's like, you have this traditional way? Do you guys have like a system? Because I know I kind of have mine where it goes by pretty quick and on the back of a napkin rather quickly. Now, when you look at it and you go, what are the numbers? Okay, so they owe this much. It's worth this much. They have an underlying lien of 3%, right? Something like that. What do you normally do, Mark, whenever you jump into this? Or now you're at a place of going, I just love it so much. All of my stuff is basically creative.
I've always been I would say 90% of my stuff is creative. Maybe 10% is wholesaling. So, what I tend to do, and I have my, JVs or who I'm working with or whatnot, is when they're going through and asking about the property, I always ask this one question. And this one question will always tell you if they're going to be open and creative. Would you be willing to rent the property to us for a few years? Then we close on it. We'll take care of the maintenance and repairs up to like $3,500. Anything more than that, most likely is homeowner's insurance. If they say yes, then they're going to be open to some type of creative. It could be a lease option as aka rent to own. It could be straight seller financing. It could be agreement for deed. It could be subject to any of those. So that's how I usually can go into it and find out like what they're trying to do. Now, going to how I underwrite.
That's golden, by the way. Say that line again. I think it's a great line.
So when you're going through, you're asking about the property, you want to, first of all, always build a rapport with the person.
Right.
I'd say 80% of my conversation is like just building rapport, nothing to do about the deal, nothing to do about the real estate, just getting to know them because you're building rapport about why they want to do business with you. Then you're asking about the property. Tell me about the property, how, the size, blah, blah, blah. Even though all that stuff is mainly online, you're just building a relationship. Then in there, I always say, hey, it sounds like a nice property. Why don't you list it with a realtor? Because then you always can find out that's going to tell you a lot about the property. Then you also say, hey, it sounds, would you be willing to rent the property to us for a few years? And then we would close on it. We'll take care of the maintenance and repairs up to like $3,500. Anything more than that, most likely homeowner's insurance. Would you be willing to do that? If they say yes, then they're open to some type of creative financing terms. That's the other thing. But back to what you're saying before, I just did a deal locked up not even a month ago where she just purchased things in January and her interest rate is at 6.5%. Yeah. So wow. Yeah. And she's got no equity in it. In that market that actually dropped. So wow. Yeah. So the numbers you gotta so we're still doing that particular deal. However, there's no really big upside in the equity in that deal. So we're probably going to structure it in a way and then do an assignment to bring the person and structure it the right way to bring somebody into the property to help the seller and the buyer out. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing on that particular one because there's no equity in it. There's no cash flow. I mean, $50 a month. And I've done that. I've cash flow $50 a month, but I have huge upside on the other end with like what Ronnie was saying before. So in creative, everything's a moving part. Like what Ronnie was saying, hey, you got
Right.
this, you got to give on that. So you always have to analyze it. And so we use a good spreadsheet where I have my VA plug it in, and then from there I can determine on what strategy, what creative financing strategy. Because in some of these markets right now, they want to sell it for top dollar, but their monthly payment and seller financing doesn't work for what the market rent is doing in there. And I've come across some of those. So instead of doing seller financing, I'm going ahead and do a rent to own and keep my payment at the rent to own market. So it depends on the market you're in also. So there's a lot of factors that go into it.
It's funny. It reminds me, you said earlier about like figuring out how to do the deal. When I jumped in, my very first deal that I did, I was in Pleasant Grove, Texas. And I met at the guy's house, and there was a big party going on at his rental property that he was selling. There's a red light bulb. It was like 9 p.m. I walk in, there's people everywhere. He's like, they haven't paid in 2 months, and they got like this brand new huge TV, right? People everywhere. Well, we go back to his house, and I think we got there at his house at like somewhere between 9 and 9:30 after we walked the house. I walked through the conversation and philosophically got him on board. By the time that was done, it was about midnight. Then I had the paperwork, okay, because I brought all the paperwork with me. And I was there till nearly 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, during this 5-hour period.
Wow.
I just want to walk you through why the importance of having a good, during this 5-hour period, the guy who'd sold me on owner financing and doing this, and why I was even having this conversation with this guy, I basically told him, I was like, yo, I'm going to this appointment. I will call you every time I have a question. And so I did that. And I ended up calling, I literally called him. My last call to him was like 2:15 in the morning. And I was like, dude, do not go to bed. Now, most coaches aren't going to do that. This was another guy who was hungry like me, who knew how to do it. But basically that allowed me to walk through all the paperwork, and I got the deal signed at nearly 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I left. That was my very first owner finance deal. And it cash flowed $700 a month.
That's awesome.
Right. And so what happens is, Gabe, you're absolutely right. And Mark, is there's so many little factors, from legal to the paperwork to the strategy to the questions the seller has. And having someone in your corner can allow you to not let that fish get away, right? Like if you're hunting, there's a specific way you can attract deer in order to kill them. There's a specific way to go into the woods at a certain time, to get in a certain spot, to mask your scent. And if you have an expert who can help you with that, you can kill the deer. But if you don't, you're not going to see any, right? You're not going to get any meat. And so having that person in your corner for me was absolutely critical, so I could learn all of those little things over the time I was together. So
that's awesome, dude. That's a great first story for seller financing.
I want to throw mine in there. My first one. That's awesome. I like that. So mine, I'm sure I screwed the paperwork up. Nobody was there to guide me. This was before, this was Carlton Sheet days, before the internet was even around. So I was 19 years old. I ordered these. Actually, I went to Home Depot, or not even Home Depot. I went to a hardware store. We buy houses. I wrote them on the black magic marker wet, and I put it up on the side of the telephone poles. Boy, I didn't know about the municipality rules there. I got calls from the city. Go take that thing off the telephone pole. I'm like, I didn't know. So what happened was, this guy called me up, and he goes, "Hey, I got this mobile home for sale. It's worth like $21,000. I'll sell it to you for $18,000. I'm like, I don't want a mobile home. I want a single family home, because that's kind of the model I was reading off the Carlton Sheets. Calls me back a week later. He goes, "Give me $15,000 for this property. It's worth $21,000. I'm like, I'm not interested. 2 weeks later, calls me back, or 3 weeks, whatever it is. Give me $12,000 for this property, and it, for this mobile home, and it's worth 21. I'm like, okay, it sounds like do you own the land? No, it's in a mobile home park. I'm like, dude, I'm not interested. A month goes by, calls me back again. He goes, give me $6,000 for this mobile home, It's worth 21,000. I found out he doesn't live in there. I found out he doesn't live in there and he's got lot rent and he can't afford he's been living with somebody. I said, you know what? I'm not interested. In the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, this is a deal now. So I said, you know what? I'm not interested, but I'll give you 3,000 for it. He goes, come on, give me 21. I go, no, I'm not interested. He goes, all right, I'll do it. He goes, give me 4,000. Well, I'm still not interested. He says, all right. So we did it. I said, let me go do a contract. I'll send somebody by to inspect the property. So I hung up the phone. I called the newspaper up. I put a classified ad in the back of the paper. Mobile home for sale, seller financing for $25,000 with $3,000 down. So the first lady called up, and it was her and her child and her boyfriend. They went out and looked at the property while the person was inspecting at the same time. I had to go to the Staples store to get a contract because back then we couldn't get them online. Wrote this contract up, had to do a bill of sale and everything. I literally had no clue what I was doing because it's treated more as a motor vehicle versus real estate. So I ended up structuring that deal, took the $3,000, gave it to the seller, and I ended up doing a loan on that for seller financing at 7.5% at 7 years. It was like $279 a month, something like that for 7 years. I was 19 years old. That was my car payment while I was going to school through that time period. That was my first one.
Cool.
But then after that, I went I didn't really get back into real estate until I was like 24, 25. But that was my first experience.
Man, guys. So here's the cool structure of the whole thing. And one of the things, guys, I want to hint is that, Mark didn't get this great deal because, he didn't get the good deal because he was hunting for a good deal. He got a good deal because he didn't want the deal. And that's one of the things I've been learning the most is I see many people who will jump in the deal looking for something. And because they're looking for it, they end up paying a little bit more. You're looking for that silver lining. You're looking for this stuff. You're looking to see, okay, maybe I can maneuver this and this. If it's not a deal, then walk away. Right. And you never know that extra follow-up. Now, I know now the market's really competitive in some areas. You probably need to jump on it a little bit sooner. But walking away from a deal could be a one-day thing. It doesn't have to be 30 days out. But you're going, you know what? This numbers just don't work for me. Let me go talk to my team. Let me go talk to someone else. And then you can always come back and go, hey, look, me buying this thing cash doesn't work, but would you be interested in me renting this thing out from you for the next few years, like Mark was saying? So those are the strategies. I mean, we're just giving you guys these strategies now of going this is some pretty simple things you can do today. Right. And I think that's such a good story of every house, every seller saying my house is worth 300. I'm selling it to you at a discount for 270. And you're going, I don't need this house at 270. And then they come back and go, well, okay, well, would you do 250? You go, maybe. And then they drop that price down and you're going, well, look, I can do this on a creative term. And now you're looking like a hero coming in and basically either saving their credit or saving their house or saving their debt or saving, putting cash flow back into their pocket. Like Mark was saying with coming out with a scheduled form and saying, look, this is the benefit for you guys. This is a great thing. And so I definitely see all that stuff. And I see that in this coming market where, sometimes rates are higher. Who knows what's going on right now whenever they're looking at the higher rates. You definitely hear every lender that I know is saying, hey, by the way, our rates dropped. And I'm going, okay. What does that mean for the end buyer for another property? If they're looking at traditional financing. So when they look at those things, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, is that now we are shopping for a buyer for our property, right? For someone to get into this thing that's not a tenant, right? And we're now comparing apples to apples, and they're going, well, I have to go to the bank. I have to go through this stuff. I got to get pre-qualified. I've got to go through all these things. I'm self-employed. It's not easy to do. And I'm at 6%, 6.5% right now. What do you have to provide for me for this property, right? What can you get me into this property for? So what happens from there? Now we're looking at the end buyer. What happens? How do we exit this thing?
That's a great question. So the end buyer that we're looking for is someone who can afford the monthly side of the property. that has the potential exit of being able to eventually refinance and win. Now, historically, in my situation and most of the deals that I've done, because there's such a wide gap between, and I'd love to hear Mark's stuff after this, but because there's such a wide gap between the payment of what my payment is or what the owner finance payment is and what their refinance payment would be, it created this motivation for the buyer, where on our wrap deals, where we would wrap it to them, is their payment to me might be $1,700 a month, but if they refinanced it, their payment would drop to $1,100. That's a pretty substantial motivation to get your stuff together and try to refinance, right? And so for us, it's giving someone the opportunity to get in now, wherever they're at with the family, with the promise that, they're going to set things up so that they can stay in this property long term. I'll give you an example. For me personally, I moved, I lived in Ireland for a little bit, and I moved back here at the end of COVID. Well, when I went to buy the property here, I negotiated an owner finance term. And the reason why I went into the owner financing was because of my situation with real estate, right? I had a couple different companies. I wasn't taking a W-2. I was just taking draws. I was making enough money to cover it. Well, I negotiated an owner finance deal because lending was harder for me at that time. Well, jumping into that owner finance, now I'm not using any of my credit. I'm not using any of any of my own assets or credibility. I'm negotiating owner finance terms so I can get things set up to refinance later. And those are the people that we're going after to be able to help is, hey, we have this opportunity that's easier for you so you can know exactly what you need to set up later. Mark, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So the end buyer, you have to really look at like what your exit strategy is with the end buyer, because that's where a lot of the rules and regulation comes into play, because there's a lot of laws out there to protect that consumer. So years ago, but probably before you guys got into it, you had some investors back in the early 2000s that were taking people's large down payment, knowing that they couldn't qualify, and then evict them out and take their $20,000-$30,000. So there's been, and that was part of the 2008 collapse, had a lot to do with that. Besides Wall Street, a lot of mom and pop investors were doing the same thing. They're selling these homes through seller financing and make sure. So there's a lot of consumer protection laws in place. So if you're selling to a end buyer through a wrap, make sure that you do your homework so you make sure that you're in compliance. However, if you're selling it, and this is what I recommend in the beginning until you understand it, sell it to another real estate investor that's not going to be living it as a primary residence, and then you're exempt from all those type of regulations. So just make sure you do your homework on that. So back to, I guess that's kind of what I look at is like normally when I'm doing it, I normally don't wrap unless the property needs a lot of work. That's kind of because nobody is going to put a lot of money into a property. Like I had one that needed a whole entire roof, and this person I sold it to, who was a roofer, but I sold it to him through the investment process of it, through an LLC, so I didn't have to go through all those compliances. Now I have sold some where I do regulate, use a licensed RMLO, and it's going to be some extra fees to it, roughly about $2,000. And what they do is they just go through it and package it up just like if you're using a traditional lender like Bank of America or Chase. So you just need to make sure you have all the supporting documents for the federal compliance in the state and all those compliance issues to the end buyer. So I just want to put that out there because I see a lot of people out there doing this stuff and they don't know what they don't know. So hopefully this kind of makes sense. Or just hold it for yourself if you can. Hopefully, did I answer your question? I think I did.
Yeah, totally. Like, what's the exit? So you're going to hold for yourself, or you can sell these things, right? Or like, how can you exit the property? Whether it's going to be hold for yourself normally means you're putting a tenant in there, right?
Correct.
So that's pretty cool. And then the other side is like, what's the exit on some of this stuff? And we just talked about that. So those were the two questions. Guys, I would like to go into a lot deeper, but we're going to be running out of time pretty soon. We're going to enter into a whole nother segment of this. I want to say thanks a lot, guys, for being on this call and doing this. Is there any final things you want to do and help those who are listening in this, like this new section, maybe just get into creative financing for 2023?
I would like to say something. If anybody's listening to this and you're new in wholesaling, all three of us here buy these type of deals. So no matter where you're at in whatever market, and if you come across a deal that you know a seller is open to some type of seller financing, reach out to one of us. We'll be more than happy to kind of buy that deal from you and walk you through that process and pay you an assignment fee. I know everybody here would do it if the deal makes sense to us. So, and then Gabe, you did say something that was gold, and about not doing a deal, throwing a deal away, doing that boomerang and coming back. 70% of you from my deals come from the follow-ups that I originally don't want. That's so good. Don't be desperate, because they can a seller can tell when you want a deal. If you don't have a deal, you're like, oh my God, I got to get a deal. I got to get a deal. Don't do it. Walk away and do your follow-up. But yeah, thank you so much. This is great.
Yeah,
Ronnie?
this has been good. Ronnie.
I love it. I want to piggyback on that too, is walking away from a deal doesn't mean walking away from a conversation. And I think that's really strong. Is for me, for a long time, I thought walking away from a deal was like cutting off the conversation. I can tell you I'm not interested, and then I can still provide value, right? I can tell you, hey, you know what, this one's not for me.
How would you do that? What's that sentence or a few sentences? Like, what is the?
Yeah, it's as simple as, hey man, so most people I talk to, I don't buy every deal. This one looks like it's not going to be something that I'm actually interested in. But tell me what you're trying to accomplish. I'd love to just help you out since we're on the phone. Like, this is what I do. And so what it does is it removes the pressure of a deal happening right now. And what you'll find, it's fun. It's like a Jedi mind trick almost, because what you'll find is it reshapes the entire conversation. Where like 20 minutes later in the conversation, they'll be like, well, what would it take for you to do it? And you're like, I'm probably not your guy, man. Like, honestly, like I'm not really that interested. Well, and now they're trying to pull it out of you because they trust you, because you actually gave that. So
this is called the reverse. So this is, it starts from you. So most people start with the push conversation, and then you reverse it into a pull conversation.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. You just,
golden.
You basically do that. You push them away, and then you draw them back in with their motivation. Right. And so it's, dude, I'm not really interested, but what are you trying to do? Well, I'm trying to do this. And now they get closer to you, but your barrier is up now. And so now they're trying to get through your barrier. And that can happen over multiple conversations. I had one recently, and we'll end with this, is I made an offer. And the guy's like, I was like, you know what? This one's not going to be a good deal. He's like, okay, you mentioned private lenders. How can I be one of those for you?
Right.
And I was like, well, that's a whole nother conversation. He's like, well, I've wanted to invest in real estate, but I don't want to own rental properties. I was like, the cool thing is that's exactly who I work with. The bad thing is I don't know you yet, so we need to have a few conversations.
Right.
And he's like, oh man. And we set up an appointment for 2 weeks later. We talked, and just by doing that, he's way more interested. And so anyway.
Yeah.
That's gold. That's golden. 100%. It all is that's good stuff. 100%. Nice job there,
stuff, man. I'm glad I asked that question. Guys, thank you so much for doing this. I just love giving back value on the many lessons that we learned. Hopefully we're able to give back to those who are listening, to the audience. On behalf of Mark, Ronnie, Marty is not here today, and me, thank you so much. If you like this, share it. If you have any questions or you want us to go over other topics or other guests, let us know. We'll bring them on. All right, guys.
Take care, guys.
Peace.